Your existence was scripted even before your arrival into this world, and it's continuously being composed at this very moment. Not dictated by destiny or luck, but by a consciousness field so extensive and ancient that it recalls every experience, emotion, or aspiration your spirit has ever known. There is a realm, if you can call it that, which retains every thought, every intention, and every karmic trace of every life that has ever existed. This field is so quiet that most people never perceive it, so delicate that most can't even feel it. Yet it remains ever present, just out of reach of typical awareness. You've sensed it before, in the calmness of meditation, during the peculiar lucidity of déjà vu, in dreams that resonate more deeply than real life. The ancients referred to it as Akasha. Mystics recognized it intuitively. We now refer to it as the Akashic records. But don't be fooled. This isn't merely a modern spiritual concept. It serves as the foundation of your reality. Once your eyes are open to it, you'll view yourself through a new lens. There's a reason you occasionally have the impression that your existence is part of a narrative you don't fully grasp. As if you've been thrust into a chapter mid-story without any recollection of previous pages. That sensation is not mere fantasy. It's intuition. Deep within, something in you understands that your soul has experienced far more than this singular life. It recognizes that a record of those past existences remains intact and that it didn't vanish upon your birth into this incarnation. This record has a name that has been shared across ages, cultures, and continents: the Akashic records. The Akashic records aren't a physical book. They aren't tangible objects, locked away in some ancient library or buried underground. They exist in a realm beyond time and space, a non-physical consciousness field that functions as a spiritual database. Envision a vibrational archive that retains not only your actions, but also your thoughts, emotions, intentions, every decision you've ever made, every lesson you're meant to learn, and every lifetime you've lived. And it's not just you. It encompasses everyone, every spirit, every experience. This isn't a notion reserved for an exclusive group. This represents the very essence of consciousness itself. The term Akashic is derived from the Sanskrit word Akasha, which translates to ether or spirit. It is recognized as the fifth element in ancient Indian cosmology, existing beyond earth, water, fire, and air, and symbolizes the subtle energetic essence from which everything arises. For ancient civilizations, Akasha was more than a mere poetic expression. It served as the invisible connection binding all of existence, the medium through which divine intelligence manifests, and the records act as the memory of that field. This concept isn't confined to an obscure niche of metaphysics. Variants of this idea can be found in nearly every mystical tradition. The Hebrews referred to it as the Book of Life, while the ancient Egyptians believed in a hall of records. In Islam, it's known as the Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet that documents all events. Additionally, in contemporary Western esotericism, figures such as Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner extensively discussed a spiritual memory field that surpasses our sensory limitations. They weren't fabricating these ideas, they were recollecting them. If you've ever found yourself pondering why certain individuals seem innately wise, or why you experience unexplained fears, extraordinary talents, or deep emotional responses that feel like they belong to a past life, rest assured, you're not losing your mind. You're tuning into the reverberations from the records. You're more than your present circumstances. You are a soul bearing layers of experiences, and those layers are purposefully constructed. They form patterns that are part of a broader curriculum your soul consented to explore. However, until you recognize these patterns, they will unconsciously continue to manifest lifetime after lifetime. This is where the records transition from being a mere concept to becoming a key, a guide, a compass that directs you back to your true self. Embedded within them are the answers, not only about who you have been, but also about who you are destined to become. Insights await to be acknowledged, and lessons are pending integration, and a reality that most individuals barely scratch the surface of. Your purpose isn't something you create, it's something you recollect. Some truths are too vital to be voiced openly, yet they shouldn't remain concealed. Enroll in Insights Academy via the link in the description to get a complimentary digital copy of the Kabbalon while it's still up for grabs. Because here's what often goes unmentioned: the records are not forbidden, they're simply overlooked. Many never attempt to tap into them, not due to a lack of ability, but because they were never informed it could be done. They grew up believing that knowledge was confined to books, authority resides within institutions, and solutions must come from external sources. The records challenge that notion. They reveal that the highest form of knowledge isn't something learned, it's something remembered. You don't have to be a guru or a clairvoyant to access this wisdom. All you need is to quiet your mind enough to hear what's been resonating within you all along. The Akashic field doesn't cater only to the privileged, it responds to intention, authenticity, and preparedness. Hence, the real inquiry isn't whether you can reach the records, but rather what unfolds when you do. Long before the term Akashic records ever emerged, there were those who knew, not through theory, but through direct experience. Visionaries, mystics, seers, and sages who touched something beyond the surface and retrieved messages that were inscribed in light, not ink. They didn't refer to it as a record because their encounter transcended language. It was truth expressed in its most fundamental, vibrational essence. Across various continents and cultures, they spoke of a realm, if such a thing can even be called a realm, where the memories of the soul resided, safeguarded not by walls, but by frequency. Those who accessed it didn't read with their eyes, they sensed it within their very being. The Rishis of ancient India described Akasha as the elemental essence of all existence, the source of all form and thought. In their perspective, nothing was ever truly lost. It gently drifted back to the Akasha, reminiscent of ripples merging with the ocean. Tibetan mystics described this similar essence as the mind stream, an ongoing flow of consciousness that extends beyond individual lifetimes. Cultures like the Druids, Egyptians, Gnostics, and Mayans each had distinct names for this phenomenon. While they articulated it through various languages and symbols, they all shared the profound understanding that there exists an unseen realm, retaining all memories. So, what became of this insight? It hasn't vanished. Rather, it was systematically dismantled, sidelined, and recast as superstition by institutions that were threatened by its implications. If the soul possesses a memory, then identity cannot be confined by nationality, faith, or even physicality. If these records exist, then the source of authority must originate from within, not imposed from outside. This poses a significant threat to systems designed for control. During colonization, numerous indigenous cultures with oral traditions of soul memory faced suppression. Sacred rites that facilitated connections to the Akasha were banned, ridiculed, or replaced. The destruction of ancient libraries, the vilification of pagan customs, the alteration of spiritual narratives, these were all part of a broader scheme to sever the bond between humanity and the knowledge that transcends the five senses. Even now, in a rationalist era, the idea of the Akashic records is often brushed off as pseudoscience or fantasy. Yet critics cannot sufficiently account for why some children seem to recall past lives or why strangers might share identical dreams, nor can they explain the strikingly similar descriptions of soul memory found in ancient texts from various civilizations. The issue isn't the absence of evidence, it's that it doesn't align with the prevailing narrative. A society rooted in consumption and compliance cannot thrive if individuals begin questioning, who was I before this? And what if my assigned story isn't the entire narrative? Hence, a new story was offered, one that defines you by your name, job, ethnicity, and gender. Your personal history begins with your birth certificate and concludes with your death certificate. Everything else is merely a fairy tale. Yet, underlying that narrative lies an ancient truth that has been patiently awaiting rediscovery. This truth exists within the dreams you can't articulate and is whispered during periods of quietude. It emerges when the clamor of the world diminishes, allowing you to hear your inner wisdom. This discussion isn't about supplanting religion, asserting a perspective, or unveiling covert knowledge. It's about awakening. It's about reclaiming a truth that has been lost, not solely through violence, but also through mockery, distraction, and forgetfulness. The Akashic records are not a modern invention. They are profoundly ancient. The novelty lies in the increasing number of individuals beginning to reconnect with them. Perhaps that's the reason you're here, not to acquire new information, but to recollect something timeless, something your ancestors knew before it was taken from them, something your spirit has been attempting to reveal to you all along. When you comprehend that history isn't merely inscribed in books, but rather encoded in energy, frequency, and within you, you start to reclaim a narrative no one else can articulate for you. Accessing the Akashic records does not require a library card. You don't need consent from an institution, a degree, or any type of spiritual hierarchy. These records were never intended to be owned or confined. They are meant to be experienced, remembered, and lived. This distinction sets them apart from other sources of knowledge. They resonate not with intellect but with frequency. You don't simply read them with your eyes. You align with them. You attune to them. Think of it as tuning a radio dial, where your awareness enters a state where the noise dissipates and the signal becomes clear. People have engaged in this process for millennia, even when it was unnamed. It manifests during deep meditation, altered states of awareness, or dreams that unveil past lives or forgotten recollections. It might even occur spontaneously amidst deep sorrow, intense joy, or complete stillness. The entry point remains a singular, consistent presence. You can't force your way into the records. Rather, you ease into them. You surrender to an awareness so pure and quiet that your energy resonates with the frequency of truth itself. Mystics and wise ones frequently refer to the records as a vibrational realm. This is because their content isn't conveyed in a familiar language. You won't find sentences or paragraphs. Instead, there exists a sense of knowing. It's about resonance. Some people visualize the records as an expansive library or an ancient sanctuary filled with scrolls and illumination. Others may perceive it as an array of colors, sounds, or symbols that don't convert to words, but evoke a deep emotional understanding. That's the crux of the matter. The records don't communicate with your analytical mind. They connect directly with your soul. Contemporary spiritual seekers have devised various approaches for consciously entering this realm. Some utilize guided meditations or prayers, such as the Pathway Prayer made famous by Linda Howe. Others delve into the records through automatic writing, permitting the subconscious to articulate what the conscious mind may not yet grasp. Techniques like breath work, plant medicine use, lucid dreaming, and astral projection have also been utilized as gateways for those ready to navigate the deeper levels of consciousness. Yet no single approach fits everyone. The method is less crucial than the intention behind it. Intention is paramount. Approaching the records in search of validation, control, or amusement will likely yield nothing significant. Conversely, if you come with respect, curiosity, and an openness to transformation, the field will respond, and the process may not always be easy. The records do not cater to your ego. They reveal patterns, hard truths, cycles you've revisited through lifetimes, and wounds you've carried far longer than your own identity. Yet they also unveil your inherent power, ancient and untapped, waiting for you to reclaim it. They provide clarity where you may have felt lost for years, repeatedly imparting the same message. You are so much more than what you have been led to believe. What's fascinating is that countless individuals have tapped into the records without even being aware of it. That gut feeling that steered you away from a poor choice. That peculiar instant when you predicted what someone would utter before they said it. That inexplicable attraction towards a particular location, person, or direction. These occurrences aren't mere coincidences. They're echoes, fleeting insights through the veil. Your soul attempting to communicate amidst the distractions of a world designed to divert your attention. The reality is, accessing the Akashic records isn't about fleeing from this existence. It's about fully embodying your authentic self within it. It's not a means to bypass reality, but a way to perceive it with clarity, beyond illusions and conditioning, right to the core. When you access the records, you don't merely recall who you were, you rediscover who you were destined to become. Such memories aren't passive, they ignite action within you. They transform how you navigate life, reshape your responses to obstacles, alter your perception of others, and redefine your personal narrative. Once you've stepped into the infinite and understood your role within it, nothing can persuade you that you're insignificant, incomplete, or powerless. You didn't arrive here empty-handed. You didn't come to this planet as a blank slate, randomly dropped into a chaotic existence. You brought along a blueprint, a soul-level design molded by countless lifetimes of experiences, intentions, and outcomes. The Akashic records preserve that blueprint. They don't just house information about your past, they illustrate the energetic remnants of those experiences, often referred to as karma or soul memory, which fundamentally represent the spiritual framework of your evolution. Many have misconceived karma. It is neither punishment nor cosmic payback for wrongdoing. Karma represents memory. It embodies momentum. It signifies energy cascading forward, seeking resolution, equilibrium, and development. Imagine it as an unfinished chord, yearning to be resolved. If you have betrayed someone in a past life, you might now experience a strong urge to safeguard others in this lifetime. If you have suppressed your truth for many years, you may now feel an overwhelming urge to express yourself, even if your voice trembles. These characteristics are not coincidental. They are strands of emotional and energetic patterns interwoven across lifetimes, providing continuity within your soul's narrative. Then we come to soul contracts. These are not strict scripts, but rather agreements formed at the soul level before your incarnation. They involve connections with certain individuals, experiencing specific challenges, or learning particular lessons. That toxic relationship, the challenging parent, or the mentor who arrived at just the right moment, these events are not always random. They may be elements of a more profound contract, a shared understanding designed to promote growth in one another. Regardless of how challenging the journey may be, the Akashic records give us insight into these contracts, not so we can flee from the pain, but to comprehend its significance. This illustrates why the records are not merely stores of information. They act as mirrors of transformation. Upon accessing your soul's blueprint, you begin to perceive your struggles from a new angle. You shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to inquiring, "What lesson is this teaching me?" You start recognizing recurring themes, the same lesson manifesting in various forms, the same heartbreaks, the same fears, and the same patterns of self-sabotage. When you identify the patterns, you empower yourself to rewrite them because awareness shatters the cycle. Once consciously made, choices become the seeds of transformation. Additionally, there is something sacred about viewing your gifts through the perspective of the records. We often focus on wounds when discussing past lives, yet wisdom travels alongside us. Skills, strengths, and even spiritual talents can be carried over. That inexplicable draw toward healing, teaching, or creating might not be something new. It could be an ability your soul has been honing over many lifetimes. And these records aid you in recalling not just the origin of your pain, but also the source of your power. Gaining insight into your soul's blueprint helps to dissolve any sense of comparison, for once you comprehend that each person is on their own distinct evolutionary journey, the urge to measure yourself against someone else's timeline fades away. You start to value your own process, you stop hurrying, you cease the blame game. You begin to trust that your challenges aren't barriers, they're activations. The Akashic records unveil the curriculum of the soul. And with this understanding, even your most significant setbacks can be perceived as sacred assignments. Yet, the most liberating revelation of all is that your blueprint is dynamic. While the past may influence the present, it does not confine it. Karma isn't a life sentence. Soul contracts have the potential to be rewritten. Patterns can be dismantled. This isn't about fatalism, it's about consciousness. The records do not bind you to a predetermined fate. They present you with a map, yet you are the one who makes the choice of the path. You hold the pen, and in every moment, you are either perpetuating an old pattern or embarking on a brand new cycle. So when you seek to understand your purpose, you're not awaiting an answer to drop from the heavens. You're being called to recall what your soul already knows. That blueprint has always resided within you. The records merely serve as the key to unlock it. For many, the concept of the Akashic records appears poetic at best, something that belongs to the mystical and metaphysical realm, a soothing metaphor for those who believe in a greater existence. But what if it transcends mere metaphor? What if the ancient sages' notion of a spiritual library is starting to align with insights from modern science, such as energy fields, quantum theory, and consciousness studies, challenging our previous understanding of reality? There exists a rationale for why mainstream science has mostly overlooked the Akashic records. They do not neatly fit into a materialistic worldview. You can't examine the records using a microscope, measure them with a ruler, or quantify them in a lab setting. Yet consciousness, your thoughts, dreams, and memories, escapes quantification too. Still, you are aware of their existence. The records may not have a physical form, similar to the internet signal that allows you to access this content. Just because something is unseen doesn't imply it lacks reality. Physicists have established for some time that reality is not as rigid as it seems. At the quantum level, everything exists as energy, vibrating, interconnected, and dynamic. What we interpret as form is merely a concentrated arrangement of frequencies. It appears that information could be the bedrock of the universe, surpassing matter and even energy. This leads to the notion of a field of stored data evolving beyond mere mysticism into a credible model of reality. The late Ervin Laszlo, a systems philosopher and a two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, introduced the concept of the Akashic field as a universal repository of information that underpins all of existence. In his view, the universe isn't a mere random occurrence, but a cohesive system governed by the information that resides in the Akashic field. He didn't derive this merely from ancient scriptures. He discovered correlations between advanced physics and the enduring wisdom found in spiritual traditions. For him, the Akashic records weren't a mere fantasy. They represented a scientific inevitability, awaiting comprehension. Additionally, the holographic universe theory, supported by scientists like David Bohm and Carl Pribram, posits that the universe operates like a hologram, where each segment contains the entirety. This implies that information is universally encoded at all times. Each cell in your body retains the imprint of your complete genetic makeup. Every point in the field may encapsulate the memory of every moment, every life, every potential. Does that ring a bell? Although these theories don't prove the existence of Akashic records in a conventional way, they certainly pave the way for exploration. They confront the false narrative that we are alone, disconnected entities in a lifeless, mechanical cosmos. Rather, they reveal a far more profound reality, a universe rich with intelligence, remembrance, and interconnectedness, a domain that retains memories, a cosmos that understands itself through your existence. Even near-death experiences, previously written off as mere hallucinations, now provide insights. Numerous individuals who have returned describe a dimension of awareness where their entire life unfolded before them, not as a form of judgment, but in a context of understanding. Some recount witnessing not only their journeys, but also the ripple effect of their actions on others, creating echoes in the fabric of existence. That heightened awareness, that expansive vantage point, aligns with what spiritual practitioners share when they tap into the records. This isn't about storytelling, it's a transmission of memory transcending time. Furthermore, there's the enigma of intuition. How does a mother instinctively know her child is in danger from afar? How do some individuals just sense when all isn't well before events unfold? These occurrences suggest a reality deeper than rational thought. They imply that we are inherently connected to a vast reservoir of information beyond our individual selves. Rather than merely guessing, we are accessing memory, and perhaps that's the crucial point. The Akashic records don't require you to accept a new belief. They invite you to recall something ancient, to ponder the possibility that the universe is not cold and random, but rather conscious and purposeful. Your thoughts, your decisions, your very essence are not transient moments consumed by time, but components of a living archive that encompasses everything. While science may not have fully caught up, it's inching closer. And as the gap between science and spirituality narrows, we might uncover that the most profound truths were never concealed. We simply stopped exploring in the right places. From the moment of your arrival, the world began defining who you are, not out of curiosity, but with conviction. It assigned you an identity, a nationality, a belief system, an educational framework, a collection of values, and an extensive array of regulations. It instructed you on what constitutes reality, what is mere fantasy, and which thoughts could be perilous to entertain. And nestled within that extensive list of unspoken agreements lay one message that resonated louder than the others. Forget. Forget who you truly are. Forget your experiences. Forget your origins. Forget your knowledge. This was not a coincidence. This was not simply an unfortunate consequence of growing up in modern society. It was part of a broader framework, a framework designed to sever your ties to anything that could empower you, anything that could establish your sovereignty, anything that would remind you that your soul carries a memory far deeper than your current name, job title, or government-issued identification. For those who retain their sense of self cannot be dominated, and domination is the currency of the world we inhabit. Thus, Rather than wonder, you were conditioned to be obedient. Rather than embracing intuition, you encountered repetition. Instead of engaging in soul work, you focused on academic work, trained to seek external solutions and to distrust anything arising from within. If you experienced visions, you were termed fanciful. If you recalled past lives, it was dismissed as mere fantasy. If you felt a profound connection to inexplicable things, you were urged to forget. All the while, a version of reality was peddled to you, so flat, so mechanical, that anything sacred was relegated to superstition or mere entertainment. This is why the Akashic records seem so remote to many. Not due to inaccessibility, but because your mind was conditioned to dismiss anything that cannot be substantiated by systems crafted to keep you small. You were led to believe that truth originates from authority, that knowledge is something to be earned, and that wisdom only holds value when validated, monetized, or institutionalized. Yet the soul doesn't function in this manner. The records don't either. The reality is you've already tapped into them. You simply didn't label it as such. Those instances of intense insight that appear unexpectedly, the feeling that you've known someone forever, even though it's your first encounter, the intuition that kept you safe, the sudden realizations during your dreams, the déjà vu that lacked explanation, the compelling attraction to a specific location, culture, or era. These are not mere anomalies, they are remnants of a memory that you were instructed to forget. Yet memories do not vanish, they linger. Beneath the chaos of your routine existence, the soul retains knowledge. Even if society tries to suppress it, the soul finds avenues to express itself through creativity, through synchronicities, through disruptions that compel you to reconstruct, through sorrows that break you open enough to finally experience authenticity. The act of forgetting may have been powerful, but the act of remembering surpasses it, and here's where the sting lies. The world never intended for you to uncover this, because a person who remembers poses a threat. They tend to resist conformity. They no longer pursue hollow achievements. They refuse to inhabit roles that were not theirs to choose. They pierce through the facade, and even worse, they aid others in doing the same. That's the reason mystics faced persecution, why shamans faced silencing, why the wisdom keepers of indigenous traditions were erased or redefined. It was never about skepticism, it has always been about suppression, yet the system is beginning to falter. Fractures are appearing in its core. An increasing number of individuals are awakening from their slumber and raising inquiries that textbooks or news anchors cannot answer. They are tapping into something more profound. And once this awakening commences, there is no turning back, because as you start to remember, you become aware of how much you have overlooked. And with each piece that returns, so does your strength. You were not meant to remain oblivious, you were designed to awaken. The Akashic records were never obscured. You were merely conditioned not to seek them. But now that you are seeking, everything transforms. Remembering is not about reverting to the past. It is about looking inward. The Akashic records aren't located in some far-off realm, safeguarded by mystical beings in flowing garments. Instead, they reside within you, intricately woven into your essence, resting in the silent spaces between your thoughts. Accessing them doesn't necessitate elaborate rituals. Rather, it requires a readiness to embrace the experience. It's not about how well you perform. It's about your ability to remain present. You don't need any special phrases, just sincere questions. No spiritual credentials are required, only the bravery to sit with yourself and listen beyond the distractions. This is where many people falter. They anticipate loud revelations, vivid visions, or something dramatically significant, yet the records seldom shout. They communicate in whispers, often sounding like your own voice, albeit deeper, softer, and more ancient. These insights typically come as feelings, brief flashes, or sudden epiphanies that arise unexpectedly and fade just as swiftly if you attempt to grasp them tightly. You can't coerce this access. You can only cultivate the proper environment for it to arise. Creating those conditions is straightforward, but requires practice, stillness, sincerity, and a bit of space. You must allow room for what has been hidden. This entails shutting off the continuous barrage of external stimuli, disconnecting and tuning in. It means choosing quietude when the world urges you to remain busy. Not because stillness is in vogue, but because it's the sole space from which truth can emerge. It is within the silence that the soul conveys its messages, often expressing concepts that challenge linguistic expression. Begin by dwelling on questions, not seeking answers, but fostering connection. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" consider, "What do I need to remember?" Ponder a fear that has never made sense, a relationship that feels unresolved, or a pattern that recurs. Don't rush. Simply pose the question and be receptive to your feelings. Sometimes the answer manifests instantly. Other times it may come later through a dream, a song lyric, or a timely conversation that feels too coincidental. That is the record communicating subtly. You might find that journaling aids this process. A practice of stream of consciousness allows your rational mind to step back just long enough for your deeper understanding to come forth. You may notice that your dreams become more intense, or that synchronicities appear more frequently. These occurrences are not coincidental. Rather, they are indicators that you are tuning in, that your vibration is syncing with something timeless. One of the most effective instruments for recollection is shadow work. Often, what stands in our way of accessing the records isn't a lack of capability, but rather our tendency to avoid. We hesitate to remember because we're apprehensive about what might surface. Painful choices, lingering guilt, unresolved karmic cycles. However, the records reveal these aspects not to shame you, but to facilitate integration, to promote healing, and to encourage you to confront the past and move toward the possibilities ahead. This is also why the journey can evoke strong emotions. Accessing the records is not solely a spiritual endeavor. It involves the cellular memory of your body. You may find tears welling up, or sensations of grief or release might emerge unexpectedly. Embrace those responses. They signify not your breakdown, but your capacity to create space within yourself. You are not being overwhelmed. Rather, you are undergoing reorganization. There is no one-size-fits-all route to the records. For some individuals, this journey takes the form of meditation. For others, it unfolds through breathwork, communion with nature, or creative expression. Art has always served as a gateway, as creating from the depths of your soul allows you to converse in the language of the records without conscious awareness. Music, painting, poetry, they transcend mere hobbies. They are frequencies that occasionally unlock more memories than any written text could offer. You don't require a guru or a label. What you need is sincerity, curiosity, and a readiness to dive deeper than the surface, while placing your trust in the process. Have faith that what surfaces does so for a reason. You are not fabricating these experiences. You are recalling truths buried so deeply that they began to feel like mere figments of imagination. Yet, imagination acts merely as memory seen through the lens of intuition, and the Akashic records dwell in the space between what you've forgotten and what your spirit has never relinquished. Each time you recollect an aspect of yourself that you believed was lost, you diminish the distance between who you have been and who you are destined to become. Over time, this act of remembrance transforms into a lifestyle. It's not merely a goal, but rather an inherent state of existence. You evolve into the library, the channel, the conduit linking the visible realm with the invisible one. At that moment, the quest for meaning ceases and you start to embody it. Picture a scenario where people no longer ponder, "Who am I?" Instead, they inquire, "Who have I always been?" Envision millions no longer searching outward for their value, identity, or purpose, but instead delving deep into the expansive archive of their soul's journey. This type of awakening not only alters individual lives, it redirects the course of humanity. When individuals truly remember, they stop adhering to pre-written narratives. They cease playing roles dictated by systems that aim to suppress them. This is where transformation begins. It's important to know that the Akashic records go beyond personal healing. They represent a shared evolution. This journey is not solitary. It creates a ripple effect. One person awakening to their soul's memory acts as a catalyst. They begin to walk and talk differently. Their reactions diminish and their intuition flourishes. They shift from consumption to creation. Their relationships deepen and their work aligns with their true selves. They no longer ask for permission to be authentic. Such freedom is infectious. For generations, we have been led to believe that we are isolated, separate, and competitive. Yet, the records narrate a different truth, one where every soul is interconnected through an invisible network of consequences, challenges, and choices. What one individual does resonates across this network. Healing is not an isolated event. When you resolve karmic patterns within yourself, you simultaneously address them within your ancestry. You disrupt cycles that have persisted for generations. You position yourself as a pivotal link between the past and what is possible. When a sufficient number of individuals do this, the system doesn't just flex, it shatters. This is precisely why the act of remembering poses such a threat to existing power structures. Individuals who remember do not conform in the same manner. They aren't hindered by the fear of rejection because they are not striving to fit into a flawed system. Their criteria for success isn't based on external metrics, since they recognize that what truly matters cannot be quantified. They start to forge new models for family, work, and community life. They nurture their children in unique ways. They teach from different perspectives. They establish systems rooted in the essence of the soul, rather than in mechanisms of control. Gradually, and often subtly, the outdated world begins to fade away, not through chaos and destruction, but through a growing irrelevance. Its hold weakens as fewer individuals continue to nourish it. Fewer people subscribe to the notion that worth has to be achieved, or that truth derives solely from those in positions of authority, that life is merely a struggle for a reward that never materializes. Instead, individuals start to live in harmony with their true selves. They rekindle their trust in themselves. They begin to envision dreams without seeking permission. This collective act of remembrance does not resemble a revolution. It feels more like a homecoming, a collective sigh of relief, a profound and quiet transformation where individuals cease performing and begin to embody their true selves. This shift is already underway. You can sense it. People are awakening en masse, re-evaluating beliefs they once held as absolute. They are leaving behind jobs, relationships, and structures that no longer resonate with them, not due to external pressures, but because their inner voice softly urges, "This isn't right. There's more to discover." That more is not a physical place, it's a frequency, a realization that we are not mere parts of a machine. We are boundless beings with narratives that span galaxies and lifetimes. We are not mere coincidences. We are not devoid of power. We are not adrift. We are in the process of waking up. The Akashic records do not serve as an escape from reality. Instead, they provide a guide back to our true selves. A guide not only for the individual, but for the collective. For the possibility that when enough of us remember, the world doesn't just undergo a change, it rekindles its own essence as well. Throughout your life, you've been conditioned to seek answers externally, searching for truth in literature, experts, long-standing traditions, and ancient systems. You were given frameworks on how to exist, what to pursue, and who to become. Yet despite diligently adhering to this blueprint, something always felt off. There lingered a persistent question: is this truly it? That inquiry was not rooted in doubt. It served as an entryway, a signal from the part of you that has always known. Is the piece still connected to the Akashic field, gently safeguarding the truth that your existence is not a series of random events, your suffering isn't without meaning, and your purpose was never intended to be discovered through someone else's manual? The Akashic records aren't distant or inaccessible. They aren't concealed behind mystical practices or buried within remote temples. They reside within you, imprinted in your consciousness, awaiting your recollection. Remembering doesn't necessitate perfection or saintly qualities. It merely requires your presence, tranquility, and a readiness to cease evading yourself and instead look inward, with gentleness and bravery, confronting what is already present, your pain, patterns, wisdom, and power. In that space, whether through meditation, silence, nature, or dreams, you're not embarking on a new journey. You are returning. You are re-engaging with a dialogue your soul has wished to have with you from the very start, and you'll come to realize that your struggles were not arbitrary. They were, in fact, lessons. Your heartbreaks were not forms of punishment. They were catalysts. Each loss, every fear, and every moment of uncertainty acts as a clue, a breadcrumb leading you back to your own recollection. From this vantage point, your life starts to evolve, not through grand theatrical events, but in subtle, meaningful ways. Your manner of speaking, the decisions you make, the boundaries you impose, and the energies you refuse to accept all begin to transform. You navigate the world with a new perspective, not with arrogance, but with clarity and alignment. You cease to seek approval from individuals who can't perceive your essence. You stop functioning on autopilot and start moving with clear purpose. For perhaps the first time, you come to the realization that your life doesn't require rewriting. It needs to be reclaimed, as you are not merely a human attempting to adopt a spiritual path. You are a soul reconnecting with the essence of being human, and that memory resides within you. There is no need to prove anything to access it. You simply need to trust in it, embrace it, allow it to guide you back home. If you followed along to this point, you are already aware of what others are still oblivious to. Don't halt here. Join Insights Academy via the link provided below and unlock additional wisdom that we can't disclose openly here. For a limited time, you'll also receive a complimentary copy of the Kybalion. Your narrative is far from over. Your patterns do not define you, and your soul is not fractured. The Akashic records do not serve to predict your future. Rather, they exist to remind you that you are still the one writing your story. You always have been. The next chapter awaits your pen, ready to be filled with full remembrance, complete sovereignty, and absolute truth. If this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts by commenting, "I understood."